Carl, climate-compatible development in Africa, that's your area of specialization.
Correct.
What does that mean? What are we actually doing on the ground in Africa?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is address development, which is the agenda, from a climate-compatible perspective, to make sure that our development plans and our agenda, which has been around for a very long time to improve conditions, living conditions, address poverty, economic sustainability, that as we tackle those issues, as we've been doing for a very long time, that we tackle it from a climate-compatible perspective, and that we're aware of the risks that we face, and that we're engaging the opportunities as the new economy takes off. We want to make sure that Africa is not left behind, and that we're using the opportunity to engage in that new economy.
So you're getting down to work basically on the ground rather than wait for some kind of universal binding agreement to be agreed, COP17, COP18, COP19. Is that
our clients who are generally leadership in Africa, governments in Africa, private sector and or civil society, but principally the governments, while they're engaged in that process of the negotiations, they realize that there's not going to be any magic one that kind of drops £1 million into their coffers through some magic green climate finance. That will come, and it'll come, but when it comes, where's it going to be delivered? It's going to be delivered to those governments and in those countries, into those programs that are active, that are planned, that are well strategized and that are well thought out. And governments realize that they need to start spending their own money, their budget resources, on addressing some of these constraints and some of these issues. And if they're doing that, well, then I suspect they're going to be first in line for whatever climate finance flows. So our job is to assist them. We provide support for their planning, their actions, their strategies. We provide research so that they've got the evidence base necessary in order that they can plan their approach so that they can start addressing the issues and not have to wait for the magic climate deal, but to actually proceed and to start action.
Give me an example where you have worked with a government, with a local authority, to put policies into action, to put climate change schemes, get them up and running.
Yeah, our very first engagement as CDKN was with the Rwandan government, and inspiring to be sitting in a strategy meeting with the cabinet, 9 cabinet ministers from the Rwandan government, under authority from the president, saying this is what we want to do, and not just talking the niceties but engaging the complexities of their development challenge. So we, together with DFID, have supported a climate change strategy, a green growth strategy. It focuses on the opportunities as much as on the adaptation needs of Rwanda, which are immense. And they have just produced that strategy and will start implementing it. They've enacted a piece of legislation to create the right conditions in terms of fiduciary responsibility for a climate fund. They will capitalize that fund and they will start acting, and they're starting to do things already. They're already engaged in a whole bunch of ecosystem services. They're supporting small farmers. They're addressing their agricultural productivity. These are all things which they're doing in any event and which they have to do and which are climate related. And the boost for them from the negotiations process and the Green Fund will mean that they can start scaling it up, and they'll be ready to scale it up.
Right, and they'll be ready. So when the money does start flowing in from the Green Fund, they'll be up and running. I mean, presumably still a lot to be done somewhere like Rwanda, but
a huge amount.
Yeah,
and they're aware that the challenges they face are massive. This is not simple. This is complex stuff, and they're not in it for a quick win, a 6-month consultancy contract to produce X. They know that they're in it for the long term. They're looking at a 20, 30, 50-year horizon. They're seeing where the opportunities are and where can they capitalize on those.
Right. I mean, something interesting, talking to yourself and other people in similar fields, the awareness, the consciousness of the situation, what needs to be done, in many ways seems to be greater in the developing nations than it is on the streets in the cities of the developed countries. I don't know if that's something that you found.
I think that, I mean, yes, when we're complacent in the first world, this is bread and butter and life and death. Not to be too dramatic about it, but it's what we do and what we need to be doing as governments in Africa. We've got these massive challenges, and we have to move away from, and we are, thankfully, moving away from, we're in terrible trouble, please help us, poor and pitiless, to saying we've got an agenda and we're addressing it and we're spending whatever resources we have, meager as they may be, in doing so. Rwanda is an example. If you look at the turnaround in Rwanda in the last 20 years, I mean, you just have to walk down the street and ask anybody. There's a massive, massive turnaround, and that's true of a number of African states. So yeah, we're getting to work. They're getting to work. Africa's getting to work, and that's the message that we need to send, because when we're getting to work, well, that's when we'll attract climate finance.